Hi, I'm Greg Cummings, CEO of Power100 and your host here on PowerChat. And we're very excited today to have on a special guest, our very own advisory board member, Charlie Cina. Charlie, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you here as well as on our advisory board. You are one of the people I lean on for advice, not just within the industry, but overall in general. So I can't thank you enough publicly for your help along the way with Power100 as well.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. And, I've been in the industry. A lot of people don't know it, but I've been in the industry since 1999, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly on all sides. And it's funny how life pulls you back in, and now I'm here from a different perspective, but, happy to give whatever acumen I can give to the industry to help people activate, acquire, and achieve the success they're looking for.
Yeah, it was funny. We were in Vegas, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and we were sitting in a restaurant or a bar or whatever it was, talking, and you're like, "Yeah, I put in all the lights to in this hotel," and I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." I feel like
Yeah,
every time I'm with you, it's like there's something else that Charlie's done that is even bigger or better than the last thing I knew. So I guess kind of without further ado, let's just would you mind introducing yourself and maybe a brief backstory for maybe the folks that don't know who you are? And
sure.
then additionally, what prompted you to accept our offer on the advisory board with Power100?
Well, I was brought up in Buffalo, New York, and lived through a couple blizzards as a kid, 77 and 84. I'm dating myself now. But I knew that I wanted to get out of Buffalo, and I knew I wanted to go somewhere warm because living in Vegas, I discovered quickly that you can't shovel sunshine. So what brought me out here was I had scholarships to finish hotel restaurant management school at UNLV. And as I was working my way through school, I got a job with an advertising specialty company selling hats, key tags, and shirts to contractors. So that was my first exposure as I was a kid in school, was talking to all these contractors that were business owners, and I'm selling them, back then over the phone with no internet, with no websites or what have you, pens and key tags and shirts and etc. So that's really where I cut my teeth and I learned how to sell. And I learned about a lot of the, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly that these contractors were going through. And then as I progressed, I never got into the hotel restaurant industry. I started, because of my first interaction in sales with selling contractors, I fell in love with sales and then evolved by, being a sales manager for various companies. I got involved at one point with the deregulation of telecommunications back in the early 90s. But I've always either uh, been a high level sales professional in various industries and or started my own companies, and have really done that by doing nothing more than knocking doors and utilizing my sales skills. Fast forward to 1999, I was in between professions, businesses, etc. And a gentleman approached me that was in the floor leveling business, the gypcrete business. I don't know if you're familiar with gypcrete, but it's a lightweight concrete that is used to fix cracked and spalled concrete floors, and is used, it's mandatory in wood structures, multifamily housing. You have to have an inch or an inch and a quarter of this lightweight concrete that goes over the plywood subfloor. It acts as a fire barrier and etc. That being said, I went in as a consultant for this company, and I started selling the product and getting it spec'd in to some high level projects like the Wynn Resort and Mandalay Bay and the Venetian and what have you. And that was my introduction to the construction business. Now, as I progressed in that, high-rise condos like Turnberry Towers and Allure, all these high-rise towers in the early 2000s started coming out of the ground, and they all needed sound control flooring because people would buy a shell. So I'd start going in and I'd start selling the sound control flooring to the homeowners, and then they'd say, "Hey, Charlie, where can I get countertops? Where can I get a painter? Where can I find drapery or shades and what have you?" And lo and behold, I walked into a guy's unit that I had just sound controlled, and his name was Ron. He was out of LA, and he said, "These samples are for you." I said, "What are you talking about, Ron? These samples are for me." He said, "You, my friend, are a consummate sales pro. You, my friend, are the first guy that every homeowner within these 400 units in this tower, right? You're the first guy that they see. And then they're going to trust because you did a good job on my unit." He goes, "And then they're going to ask you, where can they get shades for these windows?" Now, again, we're in a huge high-rise tower, so these windows were massive. And he put me in the shade business. And then I started doing flooring, and then I started doing paint, and then I started doing countertops and AV systems and et cetera. I really should have been a GC. But that being said, that was my introduction into the world of what I used to call construction. Little did I know that I was in the home improvement business. And you know when I really knew that I was in the home improvement business?
When's that?
I was at a Dave Yoho event about 2 years ago, and I was speaking at the event, and I was getting ready to speak, and some contractor veteran was next to me, and he looked over at me and he goes, "I've never heard of you. What the hell do you know about the home improvement business?" And I sat there thinking to myself, and I'm like, yeah, I used to call it construction, right? I was in the construction business, but that's exactly what I was in, was the home improvement business. So I share that with you and your audience to say that for me and what I go out and preach and teach, and I think that's why we bonded, right? At the end of the day, what every contractor needs to understand, whether they're brand new, and most of the consummate pros that have been in it for years understand it, we're really in the distribution business. So your ability to connect with people, go out there, knock a door and prospect, convey your marketing message of who you are and what you do, and then be able to start that conversation that converts, is what everyone in business needs to do. Now, I've been fortunate enough to do it in a lot of different industries, but from 2000 really through 2014, I was boots on the ground. I was knocking doors. I was getting my product spec'd into major jobs like the Wynn and Mandalay Bay. And then again, when these high-rise towers came to be, I was really turnkeying units and really selling every sub-trade known to man to take from a shell condo, right? Really just a gray shell with not even flooring, and giving them a finished product. And then I even got into, design and draperies and even furnishing. So I'm very familiar with the industry and know what it is to close a deal at the kitchen table.
Yeah, like I said, every time I talk to you, there's something new that you've done and that you have experience with. It's amazing. No wonder why you're on big stages all across the country talking, writing books. I mean, you name it. Your advice, like I said, to me has been great, and also to others. I know you've helped shape and change a lot of people's lives. Now, I'm curious. I want to ask a question. Let's go back even further to maybe your adolescence. Mm-hmm. What is the earliest lesson that you've learned, Charlie, that you still carry with you to this day?
Well, as a young kid, I always wanted to have my own money. I don't know why that was. I was just programmed like that. I just didn't want to have to ask my parents for anything. Although whatever I asked for, I was fortunate I got, right? But I admired the ability to watch people that had money, right? I'd watch my dad's business associates pull up in fancy cars and have success. So as a kid, the first thing I wanted to do was have a paper route, because I knew that would be step one for real business. Now, prior to that, I was shoveling driveways and raking leaves or doing odd jobs for neighbors to make money. But my first business venture was getting a paper route. And in Buffalo, New York, as I'm sure you're aware, it's hot in the summer and you're freezing in the winter.
Yeah.
Well, the paper distribution center for our neighborhood was 5 doors down from me. The truck used to pull up, the Buffalo Evening News truck would pull up at 3:30 and dump all these papers in my neighbor's driveway.
And so for maybe the young folks that don't know, you're talking about newspapers, right?
That's right. See, I'm forgetting. Right. Newspapers. There's no internet, right? You literally had to read something and you couldn't hit a button on the newspaper and watch a video.
Yeah.
This guy
and when you say deliver, you don't mean send an email. You mean actually riding your bike and putting the newspaper on the stoop of the subscribers, right?
It didn't matter. The papers.
I love it.
So this guy used to pull up in this Cutlass Supreme. Now, back in the day, I'm talking, it's probably 1976, 77. I'm like 10, 11 years old. And I used to look at this, guy that was 16, right? I'm 11, 12 years old, however old I was. And I'm like, he used to grab his papers, throw them in his trunk and leave. And I'm like, why is this guy, like this older kid, still delivering newspapers? So I followed him on my bike. Well, there was a place called Kenmore Towers. It was like the only 6-story apartment building in the area. And I'd watch him go in there and I'd look at my watch, and 7 minutes later, all the papers would be gone, and he'd get in his car and he'd drive away. So one day I went up to him, and I forget his name. Let's say it was Scott. And I'm like, hey, Scott, my name's Charlie. You seem like you're a little old to be delivering papers, but when you're ready, like, I want your route. And he goes, give me $100, kid, and I'll give you my route. Well, I was shoveling driveways and raking leaves, so I bring him down, and Uncle Ben. For those of you that don't know what no, I'm just joking. $100, right? And I buy his paper route. And that was my first introduction to business. Now, what did I learn? I learned that every time I knocked the door, I could potentially sell a paper. Some people bought a subscription, some people didn't, right? But I learned at an early age that the more you introduce, the more you produce. So I knocked every single door in that high-rise complex, and I increased it from 40 papers to 70 papers. And then I took it from people that would get the paper 3 days a week to 7 days a week. And back then, you had to go knock on the door on a Saturday night or a Sunday to collect the money for the subscription. But that was a good thing for me, because if the subscription was $1.05 a week or $1.50 a week, the people used to give me, $3, $5. Sometimes you'd get a guy that I used to call a shooter, right? And he used to go, hey, man, thanks. It's cold out there. Here's $10. Go get yourself a hot chocolate on the way home. So that was something that I learned early on, right? If you want it, you got to go after it, right? And life's a jungle, and you could either survive in it or, be caged up and watch it pass you by. So that's one of the early lessons I learned in business.